I'm your host, Effie Pilarinu, and today I have the pleasure to reach out to a newly found colleague on LinkedIn who is based in Shanghai. And I'm really excited to welcome Hans-Joerg Weber. Welcome, Hans-Joerg.
I'm really happy to meet you, and it's a pleasure for me to be your guest.
So let me say the story briefly of why I connected with you on LinkedIn. Clearly, you are focused on international relations, and you kind of operate, my sense is, in the intersection of technology and education and the cultural differences and similarities, especially between the West and the East. You are of German origin, but you are living and working currently in Shanghai. You'll have the opportunity to tell us more about this. I personally was curious to connect with you after I read a series of some of your LinkedIn articles, which were focused on this, the digital yuan, but also blockchain governance and China's involvement and what this means about the governance and the government. So I'm really excited to hear from you, because I value a lot, especially now, diverse insights. It's very important that we don't stay in our own network and echo the same insights that easily align with our current beliefs, because we're all, of course, affected by our environment and now with our digital life. So I'll stop here, Hans-Joerg, and I'll give it over to you. Tell us briefly, where you're coming from, and this, for me, huge advantage of your dual presence and the way you operate.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Well, I have since over 20 years contact to the Chinese culture, and probably much longer if I take into consideration our Chinese friends in our family when I was small. But what really impressed me during my student times, the contact to the Chinese exchange students, and this changed my whole perspective when I realized that my way of living, my understanding of value and society is probably real and right for us in Germany or in Europe, but in China, there are different perceptions and values. And so this was a long journey. And then 8 years ago, I decided to live in Shanghai. It was like the city was calling. And since then, I supported companies in entering the Chinese market with educational products, or I supported Chinese firms to get a better understanding of the German way of thinking. So this is, in a nutshell, what I did, because I believe it is important to open gates between the cultures, between the different ways of thinking, to roll out projects successfully. And projects can be whatever we want to achieve as humans.
Very nice. Hans-Joerg, over this past weekend, I was listening to a great podcast by Simon Sinek, and he was talking about the fact that we operate in this culture of as if we're playing a finite game, and it's all about winning. Like, for example, of course, in soccer or baseball, it's a finite game. You're in it to win. There's a tangible result, there's rules. But in life, it's not a finite game, it's an infinite game, in the sense that the rules are not set, the participants are not set, And it's not about winning or losing, it's about being ahead or being behind, and moving, basically staying in the game and creating value for everybody. So in this context, we have to think of, East-West relationships like that. So I want to bring this spirit and ask you, in your articles, you've written about or mentioned about the blockchain service network. What is that? Is it
Yes.
a Chinese blockchain protocol? What exactly is it, and what's is its significance?
When I published these three articles on LinkedIn, I did research over 1 year and talked with people and selected specific articles. So it was not easy going, but the big picture is that the Chinese government decided over 8 years ago to develop and focus on blockchain as an overall strategy, which they would like to roll out on a global scale. And in a nutshell, they want to offer us as the human race the opportunity to be part in a cloud-based open source blockchain protocol, which means I have fully access to a cloud-based application where I can develop, design, and roll out specific blockchain-based applications. And right now they are inviting up. Right now, I think it's 56 nodes of different cities, and these are not the poorer cities in underdeveloped countries. These are cities like Singapore or other cities on this, I say, flight altitude on this scale. And so if you understand what they are planning is like an iPhone did with its app store, if you want to understand the potential and the implication on the global scale. Because right now, you know better than me how many different standards of blockchain and blockchain companies and currencies and name it, call it, whatever, exist so far. But what China did is unique because no other country has done this so far.
And this is at the
So
country level. This is not at the company level.
this is on the country level. And of course, there are companies doing this behalf of the nation. And I have named the companies and also the CEOs in my article on my LinkedIn profile. And I won't judge it because this is a very highly sensitive topic on a global scale because it represents the national sovereignty of cultures, nations. And we have to understand that this is a geopolitical game we are playing in a digital world. So we have some kind of clone. We have cloned our nations in the digital sphere, and there we have the battle which blockchain currency will be successful or will succeed. But what I found out, this is not the full spectrum. The full spectrum goes far beyond the blockchain currency. The Chinese intelligence designed some years ago their big data blockchain laboratory. This was founded in 2018. And the strategy is to run a global governance as a service, which means, if you haven't heard this, that you replace nations by, let's say, units which are run by artificial intelligence and, of course, blockchain-based applications. And what China already did, if we can say China, it was Alipay. Alipay did the first blockchain-based payment without using the SWIFT SWIFT system. This was 2019, June the 29th. And they clearly said, we want to develop and to expand this kind of payment system by using the immigrant workers as a hook. This was the citation from the CEO of Alibaba Hong Kong. And if we look on this strategy very carefully, we will realize that this is not only governance as a service. It is not only to develop a open source protocol, cloud-based, whatever. It is not only a currency. It is a complete ecosystem which allows people outside of China to use the benefits of this blockchain-based payment system, this blockchain-based e-commerce system, and also governance as a service if the nation they are living in are using this kind of application. And so you understand the full spectrum and the potential of this kind of technology.
Amazing, Hans-Joerg. What I'm hearing from you is that this idea, I mean, I've heard of the term before, government as a service, but in a very narrow sense, whether it was, you know, the first steps that Estonia took, you know, here in Europe by offering, you know, e-government services with the digital identity and so on, or broader concepts, but they're still very narrow compared to what you are talking about.
Of course.
I think in one of your articles, if I recall correctly, you do reference an Accenture a study
exactly
that is
yes.
Fairly recent. It's 2018, where they look at an index, a government as a platform index, and the big five that they're naming are you know, the expected suspects: the USA, the UK, France, from Europe, Australia, and Singapore, but there's no China. So tell us about this narrow and broad sort of understanding. And honestly, up until now, I had a very, very narrow understanding of this idea of government as a platform.
Yes, if you are a lover of dystopia, of Orwell and Huxley, you will love what the Accenture study is promoting. I was smiling when I was reading this study because I expected, of course, I assumed Accenture is a professional company, consulting company, that they do a proper research. But I was really disappointed because China was missing, India was missing, and these two big players have in total close to 3 billion inhabitants, and they are fully digitalized. And even though I wrote in my article about China, we have to take into consideration that India is fully digitalized. Every citizen has fingerprint, iris scan, and it's a cooperation. It was a collaboration between the Indian government and Microsoft. Right. And it's not time about judging. It's time about evaluating the situation. And in China, every citizen has some kind of digital access due to different apps, mostly Alipay and WeChat. And of course, some government agencies have specific applications. But if we talk about the 90% daily use of interaction, it is WeChat and Alipay. So even in my case, as a foreigner, I use Alipay to show my green code, which means I'm sober and I'm allowed to enter public buildings because they have this kind of big data to analyze and track down if people are infected. So this is quite efficient, and this is widely accepted, and it makes life quite easy. If we compare what is happening in Germany, or you mentioned Estonia, it's cute. If I try to find a proper word for it, because this is very narrow compared to the flight altitude of China. And the other side of the coin is that the traceability is highly developed, which means, for example, if you are infected, if you have caused some, let's say, violence, you may had a car crash and you try to escape. So it's very easy to track you down. And if you have, let's say, questions to your rentals or to your cars or to your, how to explain,
credit, any
business,
credit,
credit system. So everything is very holistic, coupled. And compared to that, in Germany, it's not at all. And you come from Greece, so I'm sure even it's Europe, it's also not that perfect. So in Germany, if I move from one province to the other province, I get a new finance number, and there are people living in Germany. They know this gap and they abuse the system to get more social welfare. So to be frank, what is happening right now in China is very impressive. And from my perspective, I compare to Prussia in the year 1910, when it was a rising nation and they did it really properly and right. And right now, China is developing this digital system, not only what the West is claiming to control and suppress the population, it is to make the system efficient and robust. Yeah. And last but not least, it is their only strategy to gain advantage compared to the big five, to the West, to the US, to the Commonwealth, to Europe, because what is very clear, if you sit down and look from a geopolitical point of view, the resources have been controlled over decades from the West. The United States and the allies of the United States, they controlled who gets access to certain resources. And what China could develop on
resources, Hans, you mean what? You mean raw materials? You mean technology?
I'm talking about,
you mean
yes,
know-how? What do you mean?
I mean all of them. So it's raw material, for example, importing certain iron from Australia. I'm talking about technology that United States, to protect their interest, which I fully understand, had to avoid that there is a technology transfer as well as people. Yeah. And so China decided to focus on what they can easily do, and this is roll out a digital strategy which can, let's say, conquer the world. And they are not dependent on some external resources. What they need is work power, labor power, and they have enough smart people in China to do this hard work. So this is my interpretation of this strategy.
Yes, I mean, we can be talking for hours about, the current tech wars that, are a tech clash, if you want. I was just reading this morning that there's a new IMF report that says that this unwillingness to share technology between the two powers may cut off more than 5% of the economic output globally and can be much more impactful in a negative sense than the existing tariffs. So, you know, I'm always thinking of the Neil Ferguson's term of chimerica or himerica that he coined 15 years ago, which is about the symbiotic relationship of China and America, which, you know, is changing, evolving, and a big uncertainty. I want to sort of close and ask you some very specific questions about very tangible questions around the digital yuan. Here in the West and in the fintech world, we are very, you know, excited to see this experiment, and there's all, you know, the media about whether it's retail, domestic, whether it's a threat to the dollar, we all know that. But what I wanted to hear from you is, who are the people from China that we should know, like, who's the Janet Yellen of China? Who is the Jerome Powell or the Brain Brooks? Who are the people that are important in terms of what they say, the message that they are declaring in around the digital yuan, if there are?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because it reveals the differences in our cultural biased mindset. And before I answer your question, I want to emphasize on this, let's say, trap all humans step willingly every time they try to understand the others from the other side of the river. And your question is based on the assumption that China runs in the same way US, Europe, Germany, the West is running. And if I talk with Chinese companies, there was a big company, they asked me about 5G in Germany and how we can influence and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, your questions are important, but please keep in mind, we don't have the CP structure, the Communist Party structure in Germany. It's somehow a democratic federal system. So the way of thinking, the process is different. And then they said, oh, yeah, and this is the same vice versa. You are asking, what is my experience so far after these decades observing China, that there is not that one guy, this one Steve Jobs, this one whatsoever, this one Zuckerberg or the man behind Zuckerberg, or what call it. It is more a top-down strategy, which means, of course, there are independent companies which are, let's say, influenced by the government. Mm-hmm. Yes. But there is a big goal, which is deeply burrowed in the consciousness of the Chinese citizens. You can compare it to the 1930s, 1940s in Germany, where the majority had a very clear goal. Everyone was working in one direction, or in specific times in the US, where everyone was focused in one direction, and the personal interest were below that kind of top goal. And as I have mentioned in my articles, the top management of the Chinese Republic, I call it top management because it's like a meritocratic system. So if you are a top performer, you achieve one level more and more and more, and after 20 years you have the chance to be in the top leader, in the top 200. And this means they have many different advisors, from the business council up to scientists. And even if you have different opinions than the top management, they will invite you, because they know we need to hear also the people who don't agree with us. And this is the way they develop the strategies. Or I can give you firsthand information about the 7 different parties existing in China. And if you are a member of one of these parties, they sit together and everyone has the right to write contributions, what can be improved. And then there is a highly specific way to bring these recommendations one level up. And once a year, they discuss this kind of recommendations. And coming back to your question, all these big decisions, which, for example, Xi said 2019, that blockchain is the most important thing in China, we have to focus on. This is the important guy, which means it's not Xi, but his advisors and his inner circle. So this is my personal explanation of an understanding of China. If we focus of some guys which are CEO of this company and that, I also mentioned this kind of people. This is not the source. We have to trace down the source.
Understood. You mentioned now that you say President Xi, that he's published or authored a book around blockchain, which I tried to find, but obviously it does not exist in
of course,
any...
I can send you the ISBN number. Okay. ISBN number. Is
it translated in other languages except Chinese, or not really?
Some of the books written by him are translated, but it's really cheap. It's only 15 euros. It's okay.
No, so but the question is it translated?
Is it translated?
15 euros of a Chinese book for me is you know, not something that I can read.
This book, I believe it's not translated, but you can use digital translator to read it. This is okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not written by him. It's not written by him. It was written by his experts and some professors, and so it's behalf of him, and he is the author.
Correct. But I mean, it's symbolic, but I'm sure that, you know, in there we can see the spirit and what is important, although you've given us a lot of elements of this. And in closing, Hans-Joerg, first of all, I'd like to thank you for all these insights. And I want to highlight the fact that, you know, China was, of course, affected by this pandemic. But again, it is believed that the US and China will pull out the entire global economy out of this slump this year. But what is amazing to us Westerners in the outside is that the rollout of the digital yuan has not been delayed because of the virus.
Right. I'm studying in the last year several attempts to install alternatives to the US dollar. The last time someone did this was in Libya. Mr. Gaddafi, he tried to implement all over Africa a gold-based dinar, which means the dinar would be incredibly strong. And they have already implemented 2 central banks in Africa. And 2 days before going online, there has been some attacks from British and French naval ships with some rockets on Libyan crowd. So maybe there is no causality or no direct link to that, but however, this attempt failed due to the attack of this sovereign country, and Africa is still waiting to get its own gold-based currency. And if you make a jump into the future to 20 Arling RE, as the Chinese say, China tried the same. And 2019, the Ban Summit, I can highly recommend to visit the website, Ban Summit in Shanghai. There was Huang Kuifan, he is the boss of the China International Economic Forum, and he mentioned very clearly, this was an official international conference, that he would love to extract the spinal cord of the United States. But he used very polite words, but if you are able to read between the lines, he wanted to make the SWIFT code obsolete. So it's very clear what is his intention. And then I read that they are planning to develop this open source cloud-based blockchain protocol. And then I said, okay, what will happen next? The last time something happened like this, like Gaddafi did, there was a war. So what will happen? And then in January 2020, we had this great experience of lockdown and the global virus epidemics, hysteria. Yeah, but they did their job great. They rolled out completely here in close to Shanghai in Suzhou. They did successful the implementation of this blockchain currency, and also in other cities. Yes.
Hans-Joerg, I'm very well aware of these, how they've rolled out in different select cities, in select areas like transportation, some airdrops and so on. You mentioned that there are some workers that are being paid their salaries. Is that correct? Because
That's absolutely correct. No, that's absolutely correct.
What are these workers? Are they government workers, or are they farmers, or what are they?
From my the information I have, they are somehow related to the government.
Okay.
And you have to understand, related to the government doesn't mean that you're working in a ministry. This can also be that, for example, an agricultural company is owned to a certain percentage from by the government, for example. Even Huawei is a company, and the employees hold the shares. Somehow,
it's a cooperative.
Yeah, well, we could say that, but by law, it's a company with shares, and the shares are owned by the employees. So we can say it's a modern version of a cooperative, but it's an international, global run company, top performing and high salaries. So yeah, that's a good naming, a good framing. It's a cooperative, yes.
A cooperative.
And this comes to the point.
How does that relate to? Are you saying that some employees may be paid with the digital yuan?
No, they get. I think what I wrote is they get the transportation cost, they get paid, and 50% of the salary, something like that. It's about evaluating if this works. They even gave last year some money for free to some citizens in Suzhou.
Yes,
it's close to Shanghai.
That I was aware.
And it's about finding out how to make the people comfortable with this kind of currency. Even now, in Hong Kong, people can apply for 5,000 Hong Kong dollar support but in the digital
Fine.
currency.
Yes,
And so
that
this
I
is a
had read.
way,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is some kind of subvention, governmental subvention to support this kind of acceptance.
Okay. Hans-Joerg, thank you so much for sharing this
You're welcome.
with us, and tell our audience where they can find you except LinkedIn. Where are your articles, and where you mainly share your insights?
Right now, I share my insights on LinkedIn. I decided some time ago to focus on this platform because in China, websites are not that popular and mainly used WeChat. So I thought I use my LinkedIn profile, and you can find me with HJWEBER, the LinkedIn code. So this is one option, and you can write me an email and call me. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Hans-Joerg.
Bye-bye.